Hello, my name is Thomas Gunlogson, and this is my SAS project. So, what I wanted to see was I wanted to find out how college basketball teams played, how conferences play, and what their style of play was. I then wanted to see if there were certain teams if the best teams in those conferences played to that same style, or if they played different styles than what the rest of their conference had done. So, to start, I imported a data set from Kaggle.com, and I ended up moving or changing that data set into an Excel file, which I provided. And then I ended up bringing that data set into EPG 194. So it's right here. Okay. I would suggest to do the same for this in order for this to work exactly correct. All right. So a couple notes. You're going to have to change the username right here in order for it to fit, and right here as well. And then, as you can see, we have our out path, which puts it right here. All right. So, I wanted to figure out if the best teams in their conferences could, in fact, or did, in fact, play a different play style than the rest of their conference. So, as it goes for data cleaning, there wasn't really anything that I needed to clean. However, there were several columns that I decided to not use for this project. So I ended up keeping several columns, but getting rid of others, or filtering them out, not getting rid of. Okay, so I wanted to be able to find if the best teams played the same style as their conference. So in order to do that, I had to figure out what the style of the conference was. So I ended up running I did some statistics and found the means of each conference of their adjusted offensive efficiency, adjusted defensive efficiency, 2-point, 3-point shot on offense and defense, and then if they're shooting open shots or letting up open shots. And I was able to do that right here. And as we can see, there are some key things to point out. The Big Ten seems to play better defense, so does the SEC. The ACC seems to be playing, or the ACC has very good shooting. The SEC has poor shooting. The ACC allows more defensive shots. The ACC allows more or higher field goal percentages than other conferences. The SEC has some of the better defensive statistics. The ACC shoots the most open shots, lets up the most open shots, and the SEC lets up the least open shots. Okay, so we figured out what our conferences are now, and we see that the ACC is typically better at offense and not so good at defense. The SEC is not so good at offense, much better at defense. The Big Ten is better at defense and average at offense. The Big 12 is just somewhere in the middle of average, and the Pac-12's got average offense, but it's got a little bit of worse defense. So I decided to make bubble charts here, and the wins represent the size of the bubble. So bigger bubbles are teams with more wins, and I wanted to figure out where these teams were compared to their conferences. So we've got a ton of these. We can see adjusted defensive efficiencies. Iowa and Ohio State are way out here, and those are some of the best teams from the Big Ten. We've got Baylor out here. Colorado and USC are in good spots. LSU here, offensive 2-point and 3-point percentage. We see Virginia is way out in front of everyone. We've got Illinois and Iowa up here for the 3-point percentages, showing that they have that the Big Ten's got some offensive powerhouses. And so, interestingly enough, as we go through all of these, we end up seeing that the best teams in the SEC still have some of the best defensive statistics. We get through all of this and we figure out that many of the top teams in the ACC, their play styles differ a little bit. Certainly, offense is still a very big part of it, but Virginia had a massive lead, I guess, than every other team when it came to defense. And so that's different from the ACC style of not really playing defense. In the Big Ten, we saw Iowa and we saw Michigan, and they were way out there um, in offense, and that's different from the Big Ten, who is usually seen as a defensive school. And the Big 12, they had some teams that were good defensively, and they had some good teams that were, they had some teams that were good offensively. And so that differs from the average. The SEC is the only one where we really saw the play style was kind of the same as the rest of the conference. These top teams just happen to have better defense than the rest of the conference, and so that's what we found. And that is really my project. We were able to find that play styles typically differ, except in the FCC, where defense is more important. And the reason that style might work more in the SEC is because if everyone's defense is much better, it can be more difficult to score. So you might want to focus. So they might want to focus more on defense and stopping the other teams from scoring, since you know that you might not score as much either. And so that's my project. Thank you.